After my racing career was over, I was bored. I was the director of skiing in Aspen. I had a ski show. I did the Olympics as a broadcaster, but I hated it. I was flatline. I was going sideways. Then the Outdoor Life Network contacted me. I couldn't wait to leave the life of a skier.
Welcome back to Cameras Off. Before Andy Mill went into his last training run as a competitive downhiller in Wengen, Switzerland in 1981, he had already competed for the USA in the 1976 and 1980 Olympics. Despite already having 6 knee operations and previously 2 broken legs, he was at peace as he descended. He had shared with Sports Illustrated the feeling of going down an icy hill at the speed of a car on the interstate. I watch from inside my helmet and the outside world is nothing but a blur, and it is quiet. I leave my mind behind. My whole being is exploding down the mountain, but my main feeling as I look out of my helmet is, believe it or not, contentment. A few seconds later, Mill would go through a hillside fence, lying with a broken back, a broken right leg, and all the ligaments in his right knee torn. He was 27, without a job, a college degree, or a plan. But despite many of the aches and pains that would remain from those steep hills, he used them to find a way out, creating skiing content that would pay his bills for years, until he took another hard turn without a fall and followed the call of the wild that he felt ever since he was a kid, following fish, and hosted Sportsman's Journal with Andy Mill, and found his path following fish that would ultimately give him a second chance at gold. Mill and guide partners won 12 tarpon tournaments, including an improbable 2015 late entry win in the Golden Fly, preceded by 5 Gold Cup championships, 6 Golden Fly tournaments, and others, adding up to the distinction of becoming an angler to win a tarpon, bonefish, and a permit tournament as well. It's been a heck of a ride, but it's also time for reflection after a life spent pursuing the thrill of victory, vigorously avoiding the agony of defeat, and pausing to consider the meaning of life for a family man at heart who's been all gas and no brakes for 72 years, taking a philosophical pit stop to ponder a possibly slower future in an episode we're calling Through the Mill, with your host, Jamie Howard.
I first met Andy in the Keys in the early 2000s. He and Tim Hoover were in a parking lot, and they were juiced to get out on the water. After they'd already had 4 Gold Cups under their belt, they had cracked the code on catching tarpon, making them eat, landing them. We were shooting Chasing Silver, and we had big plans, but ultimately, day one, it was a rainout. But nothing was going to stop Andy and Tim. They made the most of the sunshine in the 2 days that we had left. Andy had a bit of a shift after that tournament. His life changed a little bit and became an author of A Passion for Tarpon, co-designing rods and reels with Hardy, that became the go-to outfit for saltwater tournament fishermen. The aches and pains, looking at winning and losing, what it all means, and in this once unimaginable post-tournament life, it was a candid conversation about the meaning of life and where we're all going. So, enjoy. All right, buddy. Well, thank you for taking some time. You've really been juggling. I'm glad we could finally do this.
Yeah, no doubt. Appreciate you, man.
There was this kid, maybe 11, 12 years old, and his dad would drive him up into the mountains and drop him off for like a couple of days, maybe with some gear and stuff. Are you familiar with that story at all?
Yeah, it's funny because in the summer, I would just take off. We lived on Maroon Creek Road, which was outside of Aspen. And at the end of that road, 10 miles up, was Maroon Lake. And I loved to fish.
Mm-hmm.
And I would hitchhike up there with a spinning rod and a bobber and a fly with a lunch. And then I'd hitch home after fishing all day, maybe bring some fish home. And then when I was around 12, I would hike up and with my backpack up over into Willow Lake, which was a fairly arduous hike, straight up this ridge into a valley, then over another ridge and drop down into the lake.
These days, you go to Child Protective Services if you did that.
Yeah, I would stay up there for a couple of days by myself with a jar of peanut butter, and a loaf of bread, maybe cook a fish or so. But it was very rudimentary camping. I had a piece of visqueen that I would anchor with some rocks in the bottom and tie it to some bushes, and I'd sneak in underneath it. And that would be, my lean-to, if you will. And it worked unless the storm came from the wrong direction. Then I'd just get soaked. And I had a sleeping bag that was, wool and like a blanket. And I would just shiver and shake all night long. But those were the good old days, really, because life was so innocent back then. It was just you wake up and you just chase the river, chase the fish, and chase your heart wherever it went. And in the summers, it was either, going to the river and fishing in the mornings, the weekends going up, maybe camping and going to baseball practice. You know, Aspen was very small. We had maybe only 1,000, 1,200 people that lived in that town then. It was a post-mining town, early years of a ski town. They did host the World Championships there in 1950, but I was a young kid, and it was really a wonderful place to grow up.
Kids today, I think at that age, you would just drop them off.
Yeah. The mountain kids do.
Yeah.
These young kids are climbing 14,000 foot mountains with their moms and dads. And I'm only talking about two kids I know of, but their mom is very, very tough mountaineering person.
Mm-hmm.
She was a professional ski racer on to Smalls, married to Ryan Smalls. She takes these kids everywhere, but that's out of the norm.
Yeah.
My kids were hanging out at the skateboard park.
Right. You were a good dad, and we'll get into that. Now, I talked to Nicky a little bit, and he talks a little bit about his grandfather getting into fishing late in life, thanks to you. But growing up, he was kind of a serious guy. I mean, he did not have the joie de vivre maybe that his son did. How did you develop that? Did you understand his personality when you were growing up? Did you understand why he was serious? I mean, how was that dynamic between the two of you?
Well, he had a really tough life. His mom died at childbirth. His dad died in a tractor accident. He was adopted by a man who didn't really love him very much, and then an elderly woman adopted him. He didn't have really any running water. He had to, they had an outhouse he used until he was 18 years old. So he had to really struggle to make his way through life and figure out a way to make a living. He was working in the lumber business in Laramie, Wyoming. I was born along with my siblings and my brother in Fort Collins, Colorado. We lived in Laramie for about 7 years before we moved up to Aspen, 6 or 7 years. And he ran the lumber company in Aspen. So it was very fortuitous in the fact that we went skiing the year before we moved to Aspen up at Medicine Bow outside Laramie, Wyoming. The following year, he had a job in Aspen, and the rest, as they say, is history. I love to ski, but I also love to fish. My father, took me at a very young age, and we started fishing together. But his fly fishing life really didn't take off until he was later in his years. When we got to Aspen, we tried golf together. He fell out. I stayed with it. We tried fly fishing. He dropped out. I stuck with it. And then when he was about 60 some years old, he at that time was living in Denver, and he got transported from Aspen to Glenwood Springs to Denver. And I stayed in Aspen after I graduated from high school in 1971. And then later in his life, he came up to Aspen. I took him to the river and I taught him how to nymph fish. I taught him how to read the water where the fish lived, how to catch fish. And it flipped his life in the fact that he went back to Denver, and within 6 months he'd retired and found a job at Anglers All in Denver. And the rest of his life he spent fishing and tying, these San Juan worms and eggs. He used to call himself a fly tyer. Dad, tying a San Juan worm and an egg, that is not fly tying. He said, "You goddamn right it is." We always joked about that. Oh God, Bob Popovich would roll over in his grave to hear that story.
You are so fierce in following your own path. You could have gone right down the line, but you kept to these paths. You introduced to golf, you stayed with it. Fishing, you stayed with it. The skiing, you stuck with that. In fact, you ended up in the Olympics. And as you said, you were not a world beater, but by most people's standards, it was pretty incredible. And it just kind of goes back to your level of competition. You had the nickname Wild Dog. You were going to go down that hill, whether it killed you or not, to get as fast as you could. Where did that mentality come from?
I just loved what I did. I got really with my ski career, I got sidetracked by a woman when we all do, we get sidetracked by women, but I
Hmm.
had a girlfriend when I would say in my early 20s, 20 before the Olympics. And, she was this hippie girl that was an atheist. She was a vegetarian, everything that an athlete should not be. And so I didn't know if I wanted to be a hippie or a ski racer. And, I didn't have a great mentor. I didn't really have somebody to beat my ass and say, come on, let's get your shit together and let's go do this. And I didn't have that until my last year as a ski racer, but I knew I wanted to race. I just didn't know how to be professional about it. I wasn't smart enough to figure it out on my own, but I knew I was there. I had a job to do, and I did the best I could. I did have some good results. I was the national champion. I skied in 2 Olympics and 4 world championships. And a lot of people would think that that would be a great career, but quite frankly, the great skiers win the Olympics. And in that regard, I was not a great skier. To the average person and skiing in general, yeah, I was great. I skied in the Olympics, but I got sixth. I didn't win. If somebody were to tell me, well, they got sixth in the Gold Cup tarpon tournament, I'd say, well, that's not really all that good. So it's a matter of perspective of what's good and what's great. And later in my life, I understood that I really wanted to be the best in the world. I wanted to win. I didn't want to do well. And you can translate that to life as well. Do you want to do well, or do you really want to win at what you're doing? And everybody can ask themselves that, with what they're doing. Am I just getting by? Am I doing great? Am I loving my life and really chasing my dreams while I'm living my life? And I didn't really figure that out for a little bit, but once I did, I got a hold of those horns and I hung on to them.
You've told the story before, but it's part of your story. You made a decision in 1976 after you'd already been beat up a little bit that you were going to go down the hill as fast as you possibly could, even though your foot really was trashed. It was one of your best runs. Lead me into that decision and the process where your body was at.
Well, one of the problems I always had, I still do, I always come back way too soon and hurt myself again. And I hurt my leg the summer before the 76 Olympics racing motocross bikes. I wasn't racing. I had just quit racing because I didn't want to get hurt. And then riding my bike, just messing around Aspen, I hyperextended my knee, tore some ligaments and broke my ACL. And then I trained again later that summer too soon, and I hurt again. Had to have another operation. So I had 2 knee operations going into the 76 Olympics. So I was basically that whole winter I was skiing on one leg. And what had happened, I was fifth in the pre-Olympics. So the downhill in Innsbruck, Austria, the Patschelkoffel, as they call it, was a good downhill for me. I was my aerodynamic position was terrible. I didn't get into a wind tunnel and refine my aerodynamic technique until 1980 after the Olympics. So I was always bad going across the flats. I didn't have a good position. My elbows were on the outside of my knees, kicking my edges up on the inside of my skis. I didn't glide very well. But Patchokovo was a steep, turny, icy downhill, and that's why I did well in the pre-Olympics, getting fifth. And then in the Olympics itself, there was no snow in Europe in '76, so they helicoptered all the snow off the Brenner Pass onto the Olympic downhill in Innsbruck, and the army sprayed it with water. They sidestepped it, slipped it, and made it a ribbon of ice from start to finish. And in the very first training run, there was a heavy off-camber left-hand turn, like maybe trying to like make a turn around the outside edge of a wine bottle or something that's roundish, solid ice. And a number of us slid off the course, went through the protection barriers there, went into the trees, and I sustained a left boot top injury to the point I couldn't put a ski boot on. I missed all the training runs, but I would go up on one ski and watch everybody else train. I knew the course, but I could be up there. I could watch. I could see where everybody was skiing and how they were skiing. So I was inspecting it on one ski, and then I told the coaches that if I don't have the very last train run, I said I need to get to the finish gate to see if I can even race. And I thought, and in the Olympic Village, I took I saw the cardboard box that our uniforms came in. I went over with a knife and cut off 2 strips of cardboard, taped them together, and stuck them in the back of my ski boot, thinking when I set back, this cardboard barrier, these little, you know, thin strips like a jet strip, would distribute the pressure in the back of my leg where I had a boot top bruise. And then I'd go to the starting gate and just freeze my leg to the point that I couldn't feel it and take off. I couldn't ski. I couldn't even put a ski boot on. And I got ninth in the last training run. That's when I realized I was back in the race. Not thinking I might have a chance to win, but long story cut a little bit shorter. I ended up getting sixth the next day in the Olympic event, missing a bronze medal by 4/10 of a second. And I was awarded, that was in 76 during the 88 Olympics in Calgary, Canada. Maxwell House, one of the sponsors, Olympic sponsors, had this ad campaign every 4 years. Somebody does the impossible. And they used my experience from 76 as an ad campaign. And I was honored with the Olympic Spirit Award.
Put your foot in the snow to numb it?
I froze it in the start, up at the start.
Yeah.
Just took my sock off. My ski boot was in the back of a backpack. So I would just put my foot in the snow and froze it to the point I couldn't feel it for about an hour. Shoved my sock on, shoved it in the boot and took off. It was just, but you just do what you think you can do to pull stuff off. And that was pretty well thought out, I guess, because it worked.
Yeah.
But it's just on a whim, of trying to figure out how am I going to be able to do this? I can't put a ski boot on, but I want to race in the Olympics and end up doing well. From the outset, you'd think this is impossible because really my leg was really bad.
It's part of the lore around you. I think there was a lot of respect for you at the time. And I think, it goes, I asked you one time, what scares you? We can try to figure that out at some point, but it's not obvious. It doesn't seem to be risking your life.
It's women.
Yeah.
Wives. There's wives. Wives
Right.
scare me.
Yeah.
I don't get scared. I really don't. I love going fast. I drive my cars fast. I drive my Ducatis 190 miles an hour, my cars. I drive as hard as those tires will go. And you can't drive like that much anymore because there's too many people on the road and too many, officers. But I have very fast motorcycles. I have a bunch of them. I have a very, very fast GT3 Porsche that is wickedly beautiful. One of the most amazing pieces of art I've ever experienced. And the sound at 9,000 RPMs, that car, it makes you just feel like you're on fire. I love that stuff. And I don't get scared.
Yeah.
Even when I'm almost out of control. I've never crashed a car or a motorcycle. When I've raced motocross, obviously I crashed a lot because that's part of the deal there. But I don't get scared. I really don't. Even when I'm hurt, I go, oh, I got this. I don't know. Maybe I'm just not smart enough.
Well, they said, was it Alex Honnold? They had to brain scan him to figure out why he wasn't getting scared on his free solo. So they would have, maybe you should run you through an MRI.
Well, I watched his speech he gave a talk in Aspen about that. He said, I'm in a machine and they're flashing me photographs. Are they really serious thinking that a photograph's going to scare me, when I hang on a wall at 3,000 feet above the ground floor?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. He just, here's a guy who has perfected his art form to the point where he's not really taking any risk. He's been on that wall for 8 years with ropes. He studied every single move for 8 years. He has brushed every crack. And he attempted that climb on El Cap once and he backed off because it wasn't right. And then when he did it, it was just like, I have this. All the tough moves he had done hundreds of times. And then when he finally did it, we were all standing back in an amazement and watching, the movie. But when he speaks about it, it made sense. It was like him walking across, the parking lot to go grocery shopping. But it was the face of El Cap. I'm sure it's obviously it's much more grandesque than how I just explained it. But when you listen to him speak, it was almost like, yeah, I have this. I was not scared at all. I had it because of the preparation. So when you're talking about sports and people doing things, when there's a lot of pressure, if you've refined your craft so extensively, so profoundly in depth, it's easy.
Yeah, and we're gonna get into that. I think Alex talked about that. He wasn't gonna go up that mountain even though they were filming. He stopped and came back down. He said until he knew in his mind that he had it,
Yeah,
then he had no fear whatsoever.
yeah. He attempted that one day, but he didn't have the mojo and he backed out.
Right. Yeah, we like mojo. I think when it comes, as you said, the only thing that might scare you is women, but I'm not even sure about that either because I think when you asked your dad's secretary to the prom, um,
Well, I always ask. I just sometimes don't like the results, I guess.
what precipitated that move?
Why not? She was prettier than all the girls I was going to high school with, so I asked my dad's secretary at the high school prom, and she said, yeah. He was not very happy. I think he was just jealous. She was not that much older than me. My God, I'm 18, she's 28.
Yeah, nice move. Well,
Yeah.
when it talks to you talk about refining a craft to the point where you're not thinking about it anymore, and I think we're going to get there eventually. We might as well jump ahead for a minute, but I think a big moment for you in your competitive career was when you figured out how to competitively catch saltwater fish, especially tarpon. And I feel like there was this moment where you and I met. It was in the early 2000s, and you had cracked the code. In your mind, you're like, I absolutely, I got this. Just get here. Don't worry about it. I figured this out. And it was an interesting journey for you to get to that place of feeding a tarpon and fighting a tarpon. That maybe we start with Harry Spear was an interesting part of your journey of obsession with success.
Well, tarpon fishing is just an extension of everything else I had done before I'd got to the ocean. I was a fisherman, my casting was good. Um, but my last year as a ski racer, let's step back just a little bit. I
Yeah,
had this coach that came in from the Austrian team, Andreas Rauch. And it was after the Olympics in 1980, the coaches said, look, we need to make room for younger skiers. You've been around a while and you're not doing well. And they said, if you don't come back from the last World Cup, we and in the first seed in the world, the top 15 skiers in the world, we're going to make room for somebody else. I missed a gate in the last World Cup. I went to Squaw Valley, which was the actual last race of the season, a NORAM event and a Can-Am, Canadian American Series event. The first race was the national championships, and I'd already won that, I think in 76 or 75. But I wanted to retire as national champion, and I got second in the first race. And that night I went out, and it was pretty much over. My career was over, and I just got plowed, just annihilated. And it doesn't make any sense to race the next day, but I raced and won the race by such a large margin that the point spread put me back in the first seed in the world, and they couldn't kick me off the team. So that summer, I realized I had one last chance, and I trained my ass off. And I switched back to laying boots and Rosno skis. I got an Austrian coach just by chance. The ski team hired this guy, and he told me, he said, "I'm going to get you into a wind tunnel. I got to change your tuck position. We're going to go to Europe and train with the Europeans because I think you can win." He said, "You can be a lot better. I know it. I see it. I know I've been watching you for a long time." And here was a guy who was my first mentor. He saw what I needed, and I didn't know, but he put the dots together. I got into a wind tunnel. I changed my tuck position, skied with the Austrians. Long story short, I had my best year ever. I got fourth in Val Gardena, won all the training runs in St. Moritz before I tweaked my knee, and then I got hurt in Wengen. That's a long story, but I broke my neck, my back, my leg, and all the ligaments in my right knee. So that ended my career just when I was about ready to win. But what that did that year, it taught me that if I connect the dots and pay attention and have great mentors that can refine me, my skills and my desires and my goals, I can win. I just needed a quarterback to lead me, the team of Andy, the team of Mill. I needed a quarterback, and I was not that quarterback yet. So this ski coach was my quarterback for a little bit, and Harry Spear in the fishing world was my fishing quarterback. I got with Harry, and Harry was willing to work with me. He knew, I think he knew I had the talent. I had great eyes. I could cast, and he refined my ability to see things I'd never seen before, how fish move, how fish react. I'd never seen a mudding bonefish before. He showed me what mudding bonefish are. I got second in my first bonefish tournament. I won the fall 5 bonefish tournament. So right away I got second and first, but he had groomed me for 7 years before I started doing this. And we were in the Gold Cup together. Harry and I fished for 3 tournaments, 2 bonefish tournaments and the tarpon tournament. And in the tarpon tournament, first fish I hooked was a giant out of a place called Loggerhead. And I was fighting him, not fighting very hard. I was nervous because it was the Gold Cup, and I'd always heard about this big tournament, and I wanted to do well, but I had no expectations because I really didn't know my limitations or what to really expect. I was kind of overwhelmed. And after about an hour or so, I was so thirsty, my tongue was stuck to my mouth, and I said, "Hey, Harry, I could really use some Gatorade. I'm so thirsty." He said, "You catch me this damn fish, I'll give you some Gatorade." And right after that, I mean, he was like, "You get me this goddamn fish in the boat, you motherfucker." I want this fish now. And the hook broke and the fish got off. I was so relieved that the hook broke and I didn't break him off, right? And then about an hour later, we hooked this fish, and Harry had his hands on this fish, and it slid out of his hands. I tried to back this fish off, and I popped him off. And Harry stood up, and he threw this gaff so hard against the bottom of the boat, I thought I was petrified. And he screamed at the top of his mouth, of his lungs, "What in the F did you do that for?" Just screamed at me. And I thought I couldn't breathe. I was so scared. And then not a word was said. He tied another fly on, and about a half hour later, we caught a fish. And after that, it was over. I had it. And I realized that this is a game. He taught me the kind of desire I had as a ski racer in my last years that I needed to have as a fisherman through his reactions when I broke that fish off. That this is serious stuff. This is his life.
What age?
I was 42, 72 now. But this was Harry's life. He had won all these tournaments. He'd won, already 4 Gold Cups with Glenn Flutie. He'd won all these bonefish tournaments. So I had a chance to see his perspective in his life as a champion tournament fisherman. And right away, I understood because I had that as a skier. I didn't have it as a fisherman yet. But when I saw how he taught me and demanded me to watch and pay attention and how the fish reacted to what I would do with a fly, how a fish was acting in the water before I would ever make a cast, and how serious he was about losing or winning tournaments, then I got that. And I realized, okay, I've got this. And after that, I was thinking on my own. He would say, "Throw the fly here," and I could see something different. I was starting to lead the fly to the fish much further than he was telling me. He would say, "That's a terrible cast, recast, recast." And I'd leave the fly there, and the current would drifting the fly, and all of a sudden I'd see a little flash where the fish would crack his cheeks, his gills would flare, and I'd just strip tight, and I'd have this tarpon on, and Harry'd scream out, "Great cast!" So I was already seeing things differently than Harry was. But together, we could have done a lot of great stuff. I did a lot of great things with other guides, but Harry was already kind of on his way out. But I got Harry led me to, where I had to go, but I pushed a lot harder after Harry left. And when you and I met, cracking the code was when I had refined all the things I'd refined to win at a high level. And I'd already won a bunch of Gold Cups before you and I started fishing. So in the movie Chasing Silver that you produced, you saw me screaming and yelling and demanding fish to bite my fly, screaming when fish would fall off the hook. I was 0 for 28, by going into that film. And then we ended up catching the fish. And then, I said, nobody beats me 30 times in a row or something like that. And I finally caught one. And then we won the Gold Cup the next week. But what you saw was when I was really at my prime.
Yeah.
I was young, I was aggressive, barefooted. I could cast the fly wherever I needed to. I felt like I could catch every fish that came down the pike. When I'd see a fish, I knew one fish might not be available because of the angle, but if I had the angle, he was going to come into the boat. I was just so sure of myself. I knew what to do and had refined everything.
And that thirst for winning, you often talk about the difference between good and great. That thirst for winning that Harry had, and then suddenly sometimes think of you like a really pure breed dog. Like sometimes when someone points you in the right direction, it's like you can't get him off of it. And I feel like he suddenly was like, okay, go. And you're like, go, And whether Nicky says we're doing a podcast or somebody says we're doing a book, you wait, you wait, you wait on the porch, and then when you finally go, you just go. You're
Yeah.
all in.
Yeah, yeah. No, it is. And it gets me in trouble too. You know, it has gotten me into trouble because I'm not that smart. I just have a lot of will.
You have a lot of will. I mean, you can will a lot of things into existence. I mean, after you went through that fence at Wengen and you thought, oh crap, here I am, I'm gone, I'm done, and then you said, I got to
Yeah.
figure this out. And a lot of people who don't want to work for someone like you think, well, I better suck it up. Screw that. I'm not gonna work for someone. I'm gonna figure this out, you know.
Yeah, and that's what I did because after I got hurt as a skier, I knew I couldn't work for anybody. I was I didn't have that temperament.
Hmm.
And I thought the only way I can make a living and make some money is to have exposure. I was no longer a racer, but I could start a TV show, and I started Ski with Andy Mill and syndicated that through 85 ski areas around the country. It was almost like, what they do now with, Instagram stuff, but I did that, back in 1981. I had a 5-minute ski show, and I owned the opening and closing billboards. I owned two 30-second spots inside, and I gave the network a 30-second spot, and I gave them, the finished product. All they had to do is give me, 5 minutes of airtime. I made a lot of money for 20 years with that. So, just off the cuff, I'm just thinking out of the box, how can I make this work? And I've always been pretty creative in the fact that I've been able to have create a pretty good lifestyle just by doing things my way and doing the things I want to do, like, and do those things my way. Yeah, everybody's got to suck it up at some point. I worked the Olympics, and I hated being a broadcaster. I hated having a television show, ski show. After my racing career was over, I was bored. I was the director of skiing in Aspen, but it was a media position. I had a ski show. I did the Olympics as a broadcaster, but I hated it. I was flatline. I was going sideways. And then the Outdoor Life Network contacted me. I hosted a couple specials for them. They liked my work. They knew I was a fisherman, and they wanted me to host and produce a fishing show. And I said, man, you matched me. My contract's what I make as a skier. I'm in. I'll change careers right now. And I couldn't wait to leave the life of a skier.
Did it hurt your ego to be asking people questions rather than to be doing the activities yourself?
No, there's nothing about ego.
Hmm.
I wanted to be chasing dreams. I wasn't chasing dreams anymore.
Hmm.
My dream was not to be an Olympic announcer
Hmm.
in the Olympics. My dream was not to be a director of skiing. My dream was not to be hosting a ski show. I wanted to be out there winning stuff and chasing stuff. And when the network hired me to produce that fishing show, Sportsman's Journal, man, I was back on the road again. I was catching fish and traveling the world and getting after it. I was living large again. I was not living large after my skiing career.
I recall an episode of the Sportsman's Journal. It stuck out to me, and it may not stick out to me for the reason you think. You were interviewing Stu Apt, and you were standing on the console, and you may not even think twice about that, do you?
We were fishing. I was watching Stu fish, and my feet. I was standing like an egret on the top edge of the console.
Yeah. And I thought nobody would go up there. The boat's zooming along, and you're standing on the console doing an interview while you're going up and down. and you're picking his brain. I was like, this
Well, he's
guy.
fishing. Yeah, he was fishing coupon bite. Timmy Hoover was pulling, and I was standing on that console looking for fish.
I was like,
Yeah,
this
I
is not
remember that.
normal.
Well, I had good balance,
Very
obviously.
good balance. I've been on a lot of skiffs, and I would not head to the console as a
To
place
stand.
to stand. So I said, this is
Yeah.
different.
There's a good reason I've taken a lot of bad crashes in my life.
Well, when you hit the camera behind you, I think it was Chris when you said that. It reminds me of Vengen in '81.
Yeah, we were chasing a tarpon up along the shoreline, and Hoover had to back out. It got too shallow. He backed into a coral head, and I went crashing into the console under the floor. That reminded me of '81 in Bengen.
Had you also mined Stu as well when you were talking to him about fighting fish?
No, uh-uh.
So you knew
No,
all
what
the
I
stuff he was
did,
doing then.
I saw that, but I
Hmm.
realized, when I was pulling on scales and stuff like that, certain things I couldn't put enough pressure on the fish like I thought I could. Like the down and dirty. If you put that rod down like that,
Hmm.
it's really hard to pull 12 pounds of pressure
Hmm.
because your rod's not up against your belly, so you have no leverage. You kind of lean it against your hip, I guess, and pull down and back. But I figured that the down and dirty is not used to pull hard on fish. The down and dirty is just used to change the angle on a fish's face, or you might want to turn the fish by doing the down and dirty. So you turn his head and then you rip the rod back up and get back along his side and pull back up. So fighting fish was all about not only the angles, but just absolutely pulling as hard as you can. And it's really hard to break 16 if you have a little bit of a bend in your rod. You've got to have a slightly bent rod because if it's dead straight, the fish shakes his head, and if you're really tight, you'll snap him off. But my goal was to understand all the angles, and I can only do that with a scale and a pulley system. But Stu learned, let's not forget, these guys had such great fishing back along all those years. They could go out and hook 20 fish every day.
Right.
So they were learning all this stuff by pulling on fish. And when I was fishing in those early years, yeah, we had a lot of fish, but you're not hooking that many fish every day. So I figured that I had to do some homework, when I was home in my tackle room or in my garage. But, being with these guys, it was interesting. I was at Stu's house one evening. It might have been when we were doing the interview with him. We went outside and I got a scale out and I said, Stu, pull 12 pounds. And I tied a knot and I put the boga grip at the end of his leader. And he backed up and pulled 12 pounds immediately. And I said, "How do you know that?" I said, "I just know because he'd been catching and hooking so many fish for so many years. He just knew what 12 was." But the current anglers, don't have that ability to learn with fish on the end of the line. And that's what I started doing myself in my garage, is learning how you can pull hard.
And occasionally Chrissy would hold the scale even. I mean, you had everybody on team Mill.
Yeah, I'd have them all holding these boga grips, and that's why they all divorced me. They got sick of holding on to a boga grip while I was trying to figure out what 12 pounds was.
What the
No,
hell?
I thought, I thought I need to be able to do this by myself
Hmm.
and go out into the garage, turn on some music, have a beer,
Yeah.
and pull on. And I thought, at first I weighed a bucket of 12 pounds of dirt with the bucket, and then I attached it to, my leader, strung my leader through a pulley. And then I'd measure it on my side of the pulley to make sure it was 12 and there was no friction on the pulley. But that's what I did. I did that for days and days and days and, years. And when I tried to catch a tarpon on 6-pound test, I went out and pulled on the 5-pound barbell. And then I used a 9-weight rod, cut my fly line back, and I caught an 82.4-pound tarpon in 36 minutes on 6-pound test. And it missed Stu's record that he had for 25 years. Missed that record by 4 ounces.
I was fascinated by that
Yeah.
fish, and I wanted to talk about it as well because, that's essentially a trout tippet. So I was
Yeah.
curious what you were doing. I mean, Tom Evans talked about getting in the mind of a tarpon. I don't know if that gets in your head as well, but I was curious. Get
Well,
that boat.
with 6-pound test, you can actually pull pretty hard. You can absolutely double a 9-weight rod with 6-pound test. You can pull really hard. But you can pull really hard on a lot of stuff. actually pretty hard on 4. 2, you can't. I haven't done a lot of that smaller stuff, but I talked to Nathaniel about that. You can pull pretty hard on 4, and you can absolutely really rip hard on not total rip, but you can pull hard on 6 pound. I mean, look at Nathaniel. He just caught a 143 on 6. He chased that fish for 8 years, but I didn't do it for very long. But if you want to go chase records, you've got to do some homework on knowing how hard you can pull on stuff.
Eric Ersted said that when you all fished together, you had pulled one in pretty darn quickly. It was about 75 pounds on 6 pound test. And he was like, huh, that was not something I might be able to do.
He was fishing with Marty Rusty, and Marty was trying to catch the fish on 6, and they were just trying to troll around, get close enough, and stick a gaff in an 8-foot gaff, where I was actually trying to fight a fish. I was saying, pull over here, get a little closer, and I was bending the rod trying to pull. Yeah, you can catch fish if you have gone through all the details and understand the dynamics of catching big fish on light tippets.
Yeah, I remember when we fished and I caught laid up tarpon. I should have had that much more in the butt of the rod than I did, and you kind of put me through it.
Look, anybody who wants to bend the rod, you have to use your bicep to bend the rod, to lift the rod, right?
Yeah.
And the weakest part of the rod is the tip of the rod, and the weakest part of your body is your bicep. But if you keep the rod relatively straight, you're using the butt of the rod and your legs and your back to lift the fish. You don't lift with your arms, you lift with your legs
Yeah.
and your back.
I went home after that note. I had to go home and pull with the rod to make sure I could do that again. That took
Well, it's
longer than
really weird.
Andy.
If you don't do it a whole lot, it's weird, and you don't trust how hard you can pull.
Yeah.
Here's an interesting story. Before I won the Holly, I had a good lead in the Holly. I didn't fish the Holly a whole lot because I didn't like it, because it was a release term. It's 12-pound test, and you got to have the boat out of gear when the guide grabs your leader to break the fish off. So it's just a numbers tournament. And I hated it because you don't catch your fish. You just run up, get the boat out of gear. Guide comes up, breaks them off. The year I won, the first day I had 11 fish on and lost every fish to jump off. And I said, I'm doing something wrong. And I didn't fish much with 12-pound tests. So after that first day, I went out and tied my tippet, the bite tippet, to the bumper of my truck and tried to break that 12-pound class tippet by strip striking, setting the hook. I couldn't break it. I said, man, my problem is I'm not setting the hook hard enough. And the next 4 days, I caught 19 tarpon and won the tournament and set a record. So that was some work I did in the parking lot after the first day of the fishing, after the tournament. And it turned the whole thing around immediately. But it's paying attention to what you're doing wrong. Not what you're doing right, but what am I doing wrong? Why am I not catching these fish? And there's an answer if you look deep enough.
You mentioned the parking lot. Sometimes you have to literally go into the parking lot to change your luck. You've done that as well, haven't you?
Well, yeah, that's that story about Kenny Collette. I've told you a number of times about moving my truck. Is that the one?
Yeah. Sometimes a guy's got to do what he's got to do to win.
When I was dead last going into the last day of a Gold Cup, and Kenny Collette, he's no longer with us, may rest in peace up there, buddy. But he had won 2 or 3 Gold Cups with Azo from Japan, and I think I'd already won a couple. And I was last going into the last day, and we're on the starting grid, ready for the gun to go off to release all the boats. And he looks over to me and he said, hey, you got to go move your truck. I said, what are you talking about? I knew he was messing with me. He said, your parking spot's got bad mojo on it. He said, you're in dead last. You're never in dead last going into the last day. I said, are you serious? Said, yeah, I'm really serious. Yeah. So I said to Timmy, my guy, Timmy Hoover, I said, Timmy, take me to the dock. We're at the Lorelei. And he was upset. He didn't want to do it. And I had to get my bag out of the front hatch and get my keys out and run across, move my truck. I moved my truck 2 blocks, came back. I told Timmy, I said, the field is not that far ahead of us, even though we're in last. It's been bad weather. No, there are only 2 80-pound fish ahead of us, like 1,600 points. I said, today is a beautiful day. You find these fish, we're going to win this thing. And we had 5 bites and caught all 5 fish. Came in with 5 straps, and one was a little bit short, but we won. And, I'm not a superstitious guy at all. I just didn't want to have that as a question. One of the things that was very interesting about that tournament I had won 2 Gold Cups, and then I lost one, and then I won 3. And what happened was the previous year, that when we lost, there was a fish that was laying there, and we had a pretty good position in the field. Made the cast to a fish, and this tarpon came over and just kind of sipped. I had a green toad on. He just sort of sipped my toad, and I slid it out of his face too fast. I didn't wait, and I that whole year I thought, damn it, I got to just wait till I get tight. That guy should have just waited, and it bothered me. It bothered me the whole year. And then that following year, on that last day, I caught 3 fish on the ocean. We went into this spot, and my God, we couldn't find a fish. And then we found a fish that was in the same spot as that fish I missed the previous year. I made the same cast from the same position. This fish came over and ate that fly, and I waited a little bit longer, and I caught him. He was a 115-pound fish. And I looked at Timmy. I said, "We need one more, buddy." And he said, "Well, let's go back over to Loggerhead. We lost our tide, but we might be able to find one in there." We found one fish laid up on the bank on that low tide, right on the edge, and then we caught him and ran home and collected our bling.
Unbelievable. I,
We got him, yeah,
Nicky,
yeah.
Nicky and I were talking. He's like, this guy definitely makes his own luck. He's the golden horseshoe man.
I've been known to have that horseshoe packing for quite a while now. I think luck is really about, having that heart to just to chase so hard that you're not going to let that bone go. You grab that bone and run, man. Like that, like that dog you're talking about.
Yeah.
And it's so, you hear everybody says, "Oh, second place is first loser," and all this and that. But winning is really it's a different thing, and when you get that taste, obviously you don't want to lose, but you just love winning so damn much that you'll do anything to win.
Well, you often said that you spent 15 years without sleep. That was how important those tournaments were to you. Is that right?
It was. No, it was, because here's the deal. As a skier, I didn't win at the level. I wanted to win a World Cup event. And the Olympics would have been a byproduct of winning World Cup events. Had I got on a roll with a great coach, had the training, didn't have my mind messed up by trying to figure out life as a young man. We all, don't know really. We're not really that grown up when we're 20 years old, but we're in a big place. So as a skier, I didn't have the taste of victory that I really wanted at a world-class level until my very last year. Had I had that earlier, I would have been possessed. I would not have been, partying like I did. I would not have had long hair. I would not have been fucking around with these people I shouldn't have been with. I wanted to do it all. I wanted to be a rock star and be an Olympic ski racer. You can't have both. You can't. It's either you can go, mess around, or you be a great athlete. And anything in athletics, that's the way it is. Your mind has got to be sharp and clean and clear. You got to be in great shape. I didn't have that as a skier. I was distracted. But as a fisherman, when I got with Harry and I realized that I had a chance to do something as a fisherman that I never did as a skier, oh, I didn't let up. I did not let up. It didn't happen until, I ended up getting a divorce, and then, my whole foundation fell, and I got out of it. It was no longer important.
Yeah.
When you lose your family, when your wife leaves, and it's like, oh, well, everything just comes to a fiery death immediately, and you got to start over. And that's what happened to me.
Well, you've become a lot more philosophical than when I first met you. I think you're recommending books now when things fall apart, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, it's, with the podcast with Doug Kilpatrick, I read all these books trying to figure out how do I get my feet back on the ground? How do I feel good? How do I get this knot out of my stomach? You're crying, incessantly. You're seeing therapists, you're on Xanax and Jack Daniels, and you just want to get the pain out of your brain. Um, I went down that rabbit hole for 3 years. I was not an alcoholic, but I was sure drunk a lot because I just could not get rid of the pain. I was on Xanax. I had so much anxiety. I couldn't breathe. I didn't want to leave my house. It was real. And I had completely lost my way just because I went through a divorce. And, I didn't have my kids. We were not in the same house. One of my best friends was now sleeping in my bed. It was torture. And then that's when I wrote, A Passion for Tarpon, when Tom Perro begged me for like 2 or 3 years, you got to write this book. You got to write this book. And I thought, man, I need to do something. And that's when I dove into that thing and, you know, finally wrote that. And I remember Pat Ford kept telling Tom Perro, the publisher, we're going to have to write it for him because Andy can't do it. And Tom Perro knew I could do it. I was just going through a rough stage. And I told Tom, I said, I'll write it, but it's going to be on my terms. If you want this done in a year, I'm out. And he trusted me, and it turned out pretty good.
Turned out really good.
But that's one of the things. Look, here we go through life, and sometimes some people can compartmentalize better than I could. But sometimes you have these bad things happen, and you just got to figure out how to wiggle around them. And the problem is, at first, that problem is omnipresent. It's in front of your face, and you can't see around it. My divorce, I couldn't see, everything I saw was my divorce. And eventually, it's like a death. And finally, you can get it to the side a little bit, and you can see down the street, and you can start doing things, but you still tap into that. And then eventually, you move it way to the side, and you can have a normal life. But that's what therapists are for. That's why reading good books are all about, to figure out how to get through that pain and how to be able to become, an independent living human being again without having this crush of alcohol and drugs to get you through the night.
They use the term radical acceptance in that book, which is kind of an interesting thought.
Hard to accept the fact that, your life has just been shattered. It's a car wreck.
Mm-hmm.
It's a human, emotional, physical car wreck. And when I hear of friends going through a divorce, for a while, I just send them the book. I say, just read this book when things fall apart and just try to figure it out. And it's a process. A lot of people do it differently. And, you finally don't ever get over a divorce. You just have the ability to move it to the side, and you can tap into it once in a while and take a look at it, what you did wrong, what that person did wrong. And you wake up, so many years later, and now Chrissy and I are best friends. She's the mother of my kids. I speak to her every day.
Talks about living with an open heart. This is a new Andy, a very philosophical person.
Well, with age, you have wisdom, a long time ago, you don't know these answers because you're trying to figure them out as you go. And I've had a lot of time thinking about this stuff. I'm an old guy, there's a lot of stuff that you go through. And when you're young, you can't find answers when you're young because you don't have the tools.
Or the patience. Time is the only healer, maybe.
Well, here's the deal. It's like and then you get to the point that you just get sick and tired of being sick and tired, and you stop drinking, you stop doing the Xanax, you call your therapist and you say, I'm done. And you jump over the rock and just go. You go fishing, you go do your stuff. You still think about that, but you can now be independent of that pain and that hurdle that you had to get over or through or around. And it's real. It is as real as a heart attack, man. But, thankfully, the human spirit heals all wounds. It really does. And it comes with an open heart with a lot of love. You just got to keep loving it yourself as much as anything.
Well, I think that adds to you being a role model as you've aged. It goes beyond just achieving in sports. Some of that peace of mind came with the wins.
Peace of mind. Well, the wins give you the confidence to be a great fisherman. That's about it.
Mm-hmm.
Be a good human being. That's different. You got to. There's no relation there. But what it does, winning opens doors.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
It opens doors, but there's a lot of introspective thought that goes on in normal life about, look, you got to think of the big three. The big three in life I consider are sexuality, money, and fame. And then over on the side, you have your moral compass. And you see everybody, if they want to sacrifice their morals for money, to get fame and power, it gets all out of whack. Sexuality, you have affairs on your girlfriend or your spouse, and you gotta keep your stuff together. And unfortunately, in this day and age, especially you see now with social media, all the likes, and it gets weird, man, because I always tell people that want to be famous, just go do something really, really well. Be the best in the world at something. The fame will come, the money will come. Keep your head together, keep your moral compass together. And I keep it very simple. It's the big three. And if you live your life truthfully, you're gonna have a pretty nice life with a lot of happiness, I think.
Yeah, I think someone said if you're a good person, life's not that hard. And I think it's easier said than done. You know?
It is easier said than done because we always want.
Right.
We want more. We
Hmm.
want a bigger house. We want a nicer car. Now the bills are too big because we can't afford them,
Hmm.
right? Oh, that girl over there's pretty hot. My wife's getting a little chubby. Then the avalanche comes. It's as simple as that, man. That's why I tell people, make sure you land where you want to land. Make sure when you date somebody, make sure when you take that job, whatever you do, think about it. So that when you land in a spot where need to be, where you want to be, and where that you have a safe spot to land, and then you work from there. Think it through and be loyal and be committed.
I think loyalty is a big deal. Again, going back to my vision of you, this dog, I do feel like that's qualities that people, when they think of you, I think that's one of them.
I really hope so. I don't mess around. I'm a one I'm a one bone dog. I just want one girlfriend. I want my girl that I have, and I have that girl now for the rest of my life. And it's funny because I've been married 3 times that didn't work. I said, "All right, plan A. I'll give you we can get married and we'll mess it up in 5 years. Or I'll give you plan B. I'll give you a big old diamond. You can have this house and money, but we're not going to get married." B. Oh, B. I just want her to understand that I am here for the long run and I trust you and she trusts me.
Right. That's huge. I think of you as all or nothing.
If it's going in the right direction, it's a good quality because it can be very damaging too. But I
Hmm.
am all or nothing. I really am.
Yeah.
I don't like being passive. I hate it. Even in my friendships.
Yeah. You're all gas, no brakes, and that's a pretty good way to live. You made it this far. Your body parts, a lot of
There
them
are,
are going through a repair job.
I've had 26 operations, and that's just part of the collateral damage when you just live really, really is just as fast as you can go. And I don't care. I don't care.
You don't.
I really don't. I don't care about hurting. Although I'm starting to now because everything hurts and I can't play golf without pain and I can't do things without pain. But you look at how you got here and you ask yourself, would you ever change anything? To have something that doesn't hurt. It's like, no, we are who we are because of that. Those bombs that went off. I wouldn't be the person I am without having been divorced 3 times and falling in the big races. But there was a lot of wins there too. If you're going to win big, you're going to crash big too. That's just part of the deal. You talk about all these billionaires, how many times they've been bankrupt. Same deal with them. With anybody, if you want to win at a high level, you're going to crash too.
You're not afraid to crash because you're going to get back up. I mean, I think it was maybe just 2 years ago where you were almost couldn't walk, almost vomiting from the pain.
Yeah, oh, dude, when I was elk hunting and going into 2018 for 2 years, I couldn't breathe. My back was so bad from that fall in Vengen. I broke 4 vertebrae in my back and 3 in my neck in 2018 elk hunting, trying to, climb these mountains and chase elk. I was almost crying every day. I was in so much pain. It was brutal. Oh my God, it was brutal. And my vertebrae, my spine was not stable, so there was shifting laterally, bumping into my spinal cord
Mm.
and the sciatic nerve down the back of both sides of my ass into behind my knees. It was just on fire, and I was living on Vicodin trying to kill an elk. And I finally had my back fused, and then it was all gone. It was good. And then my neck went bad, same from the same crash. I had a dropped right foot, and I went in, and the doc, examined me. I fucking tripped and tore my rotator cuff walking to my truck after a trade show, and I had to have my shoulder operated on, and I kept tripping, and I went to see my doc, and he did me he tested my foot and I had no, I couldn't keep it, hold it up. He said, something wrong is in your neck. And he looked and he examined with an MRI. I said, dude, your neck's all messed up. I gotta fuse your neck. And I said, well, look, it was like April. And I said, when? He goes, right now. I said, no, I'm going to go fishing. I'll see you in June because this neck has been taken. It's been getting this way since 1981. It didn't happen overnight in a car wreck last week. So let me get through May. Let me go tarpon fishing and we'll fuse my neck in June. And that was 2 years ago. But the problem is you run out of body. You don't run out of heart. And that's hard when you need your body to do a lot of stuff I like to do. You want to get there, but the body can't get there.
Yeah.
And that's part of the down tuning that I'm going through right now. It's like I don't need to fish every day 10, 12, 13 hours every day for 6 weeks in a row. I don't need to. I don't need to catch 10, 12 tarpon a day. I'd rather do it on my terms, go out really, really early. But I always fish till 6. I always fish 12 hours, even when I don't want to. You get out there and you can't stop. You go, okay, the tide's going to get right over there. All the guys are going to be going in. I got another 3 hours we can fish. Nicky and I fished till we can't see. Huh. We fished 3 days one time from 4 in the morning to 10 o'clock at night, 17 hours, 3 days in a row.
I wanted you to tell that
Oh,
story. Yes.
oh my God. No, we were killing these fish. We'd get up at 4 in the morning and we'd already hooked 10 fish before the sun would hit the horizon, the rising sun. We'd already have 10 on. And then at the end of the day, we would fish till you couldn't see. And then we'd go back into these basins and fish till 10 o'clock at night. Get home, smash a rotisserie chicken, wash the boat in 3 seconds, go to bed. And then at the end of the third day after fishing 17-hour days, I was dehydrated. I was throwing up, and I popped a blood vessel in my eye, and I said, Nicky, I don't think we can fish 17-hour days anymore.
He told me he would get off from school in June, and you guys would head down there, and you'd basically fish till you dropped. And when you finally
Oh,
puked, that was when you take a break.
oh, dude, we fished so hard. We caught so many tarpon. It was just insane. It really was insane. I'm sure we really messed up a lot of people.
God, I love that story because to me, that summarizes everything. You just go until you literally can't go any further. Your famous Hunter S. Thompson quote that you love that summarizes everything.
Yeah, the quote is, life's journey to the grave should not be one arriving with a pretty well-preserved body, but to rather skid in broadside in a cloud of smoke, totally worn out, thoroughly used up, proclaiming loudly, wow, what a ride. I love that quote. You got one life. Why not go hard?
Absolutely. I mean, not everyone's going to go that hard because they don't want to, lose all their body parts.
Most people don't have the will. They
The,
don't want to run that hard.
the will for pain. Yeah. I mean, when I think of you as in the all or nothing camp, I think about there were times when I remember you and I were on a shoot. I won't name the location. And I walked into your room and you're packing. And I'm like, what's going on? And you're like, oh no, this is done. What do you mean it's done? Well, the weather's no good and it's over. We're on a shoot. No, it's done. I've done this long enough to know that it's over.
I'm out of here, man. The gravy is already gone down the river. I am out of here.
I was watching you pack. How is this going to work? How am I going to deliver something to the network? And we figured it out. We went to another location later. I was like, when this
Yeah,
guy is out, he is out.
just shoot two. Yeah, wait till the weather gets right.
And then we were in British Columbia. Same thing. I walk in your room and you're like, dude, it's too cold. I don't like the cold. I'm like, you're a skier. What the hell? No, I don't like the cold. We're leaving. Like, what do you mean we're
No,
leaving?
no, here's the deal. It's raining. It's after the season. There's not a damn steelhead within 1,000 miles of where we were. And we're trying to shoot a beautiful Maui Jim infomercial without fish, without sun. No, this is a dead boat.
We got a fish and that was it. And then you were gone. We were leaving.
I had my cleats on that day.
I still don't even know how we
Yeah.
got on the plane. It's
Oh God.
unbelievable. But I admire
No,
that.
well, look, you've seen my life. in a very interesting transition, for the last 30 years. We've done a lot together. You've seen me evolve, you've seen me crash, you've seen me succeed. And now, with our podcast, Nicky said, "I've reinvented you, Dad." Well, it's been a great role. And I think the most important work that I'm doing now with our podcast is got such great legs for the history of our sport. People get to know people that they would never have heard of or known or heard their stories. And, kudos to Nicky, for coming up with that. But anyway, working with my son, it's the best job I've ever had. I get yelled at by my boss and I don't get paid, but it's the greatest thing I've done.
You guys are a great,
And
great
we have
pairing.
we have so much fun.
Yeah,
A good kid,
you hit the ground running with it.
Well, he's always been with me. We got 3 kids, but Nicky was always riding on my shoulders, playing with the bait in the bait well, tinkering on the motorcycle with a crescent wrench. Even when he was like 8 years old, he knew that something was going on with the crescent wrench, and he was tinkling with the spokes, and he always wanted to be with me. And when he got to the ages where he could actually go with me hunting and fishing, he saw how hard we went and he loved it. That we couldn't go hard enough for him. He was all in. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Well, Nicky drank the water. He wanted to go as hard, if not harder, than I could go. So that's the beauty of Nicky. He's a better fisherman. He's a better hunter. He's a better broadcaster. He does everything better than I do. And it's been an amazing journey watching him grow and become the young man that he is, and the young father now, having just had a baby in May last year. That's his biggest mistake. He had a baby right during the worm hatch.
What made it special for you when you introduced him to elk hunting?
To hear an elk bugle in the woods and go chase him down and kill him is an amazing thing. It's something you can never imagine actually being able to do, to convince an animal, a 700-pound animal, to come to you, that you can kill him with a sharp stick. And that's essentially what we're doing. One of the best kills we've had. We've killed around 20 bull elk together. And one of them that was a really special one for me, I think Nicky as well. I was hosting the IGFA Hall of Fame event in Springfield, Missouri. It was on a Saturday night. It's usually in September. And I fly to Missouri for the event for Saturday night. And that Friday night, Nicky called me. He said, "Dad, I almost killed a big bull tonight." He said, "I called one in and had a bunch of cows with it, and a cow busted me. I was full drawn. I almost got him." I said, "Well, look, don't go in tomorrow night. Let those animals rest. And when I get back on Sunday, we'll go in there, we'll find them, and we'll go get them. We'll go find them and kill them." That was just a bunch of hot talk. Nobody actually says we'll go find them and kill them and actually does that. No one does that. Well, we did. I got back that Sunday. We went in there, got up into this area. It's actually above Costner's ranch. I shouldn't tell anybody where I was, but no, there's no elk in there anymore now, so it doesn't matter. But anyway, we were up in there, and I made a bugle, a locator bugle. I didn't hear anything, and then we moved a little bit further up the mountainside, and I made a cow call, and the bull answered, and Nicky got in position, and I called this bull, and Nicky killed him, and that was the bull that he had seen on that Friday night. And that was just so cool. But to watch Nicky call animals in Montana, I have seen him cow call bulls from 700 yards away to right in front of us and kill them.
Probably one of your prouder moments.
Oh no, he's a magic man. He's an amazing kid. He is such an athlete. Last year in the city championships in Aspen, he's shot 1 under par in a driving rainstorm on the last day and got beat by 2 pros only. He finished third. But this is what the guy does. But to hear how he reacts with animals in the woods and to watch him hunt, it's amazing. It's seriously something to see, but not many people can see this. And I'm just fortunate to be the one to watch him.
Were you there for his first tarpon as well?
Oh, yeah. It was really funny because it was right after we had separated, his mom and I, and Nicky was down there, and he was probably around 12 or 13. And I had these fish in the backcountry. They were kind of balled up. And he made this cast, and he'd make a great back cast and a great forecast. But on his forehand cast, when he'd go to the fish, he'd drop his rod, and the whole leader would land in a pile. He wouldn't stop the rod and keep that loop tight. So it landed in a pile, and I said, I knew it wasn't going to work. I said, okay, great cast. I'm lying. Great cast. Get all that slack out. Get that slack out and bump it. So he pulled all the slack out and bumped it once, bumped it twice, and this big flash comes up, and he's got this 100-pound fish flying through the air. And I think that was the fish that really hooked it for him, and also to us fishing together. Because when you're 12 years old, 13 years old, and you have a 100-pound tarpon on the end of your fly rod, and he's flying through the air, I tell you that type of stuff blows your mind.
Oh yeah.
It's like I want to do this again a whole lot.
You kind of took a tough love approach in the beginning. I'm not saying a Harry Spear approach, but you took a tough love approach in the early days.
It was not. I didn't push too hard too soon. It was not until I knew that he got it and he wanted it that I started leaning on him. Because if you do it too soon, you'll lose him. He had already bit, the whole tarpon bug thing and the fishing bug. And then I started demanding him to eliminate the mistakes he was making. Because I knew he could. He was just not paying attention. He was getting distracted by the fish. It's like the fish comes after the cast, and setting the boat up. One of the best moments was we had a fish. We were down there in the ocean, and we had a big tarpon coming at us at about the 1 or 2 o'clock position. And Nicky's on the bow. He said, "Spin the boat," because the fish was out there maybe 80 yards or so ahead of us. I said, "No, I want you to get this fish with a backhand cast." He had a great backhand cast. I mean, tight loop. He could boom it out there 70, 80 feet, no problem. And I wanted him to get this fish with a backhand cast. He started screaming at me. And we use profanity, it's okay because we're not father and son out there. We're just buddies fishing. So I spun this boat so hard, it threw him off the bow of the boat. I threw him right in the water. And I told him, I said, I told you it was a backhand cast. Well, we were having lunch about an hour later. And right after lunch, I lit this brand new Cuban cigar and I stood up to get up to start pulling it. And I slipped and went head first into the water. So we both ended up out of the boat that day. But those are the type of things that I wanted him to learn, which were the things that Harry was teaching me. You know, how you can get things done on both sides of your body. I wanted him to develop the dexterity of casting, where you can cast over your head, your backhand side, your front side, tight loop, open loop when you need an open loop, casting downwind to a sensitive bonefish. You don't want that fly landing hard. All these things matter when you have to catch a fish. Now, remember, good fishermen can catch a lot of fish and they can catch big fish, but the great fisherman can catch the fish that doesn't want to be caught. Great bow hunters kill the elk that don't want to be killed. And it goes throughout life. You have to be able to be the apex predator and you have to have great dexterity to do all that kind of stuff. And that's when I started leaning on him because I knew he had it and he was capable and he was willing. But he bucked it a little bit, you know. He didn't like it when I was leaning on him. And I told him, I said, Nicky, you have to remember, I'm not your dad right now. I'm your coach. And I know what I'm talking about. So you have to trust me. And he is so good now, it's crazy. He's a much better fisherman than I am.
It's a mutual admiration society out there, but also he loves to razz you. It's also become part of your brand. You never know when you're gonna get hazed now.
Well, I think that's the fun part of it, because there's no superior person, father, son. We're more equal than anything. And now that I do stupid things because I'm old and clumsy, it's Andy doing something that people kind of like watching me fail at doing, like chasing chickens.
That's right.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. I think about that interaction in the water with the tarpon and bug. There's this moment when it falls into the water where you've got about 100 things you can do. And, obviously you talk about people stripping too fast, but over the course of the years, you watch that bug sink into the water column and you transform from a guy who was just throwing it out there and pulling it to, I got this, I can make him eat.
Well, it's a dance, really. Like you see so many people, they just throw a fly out there, the fish is coming, they just start stripping really quickly. Now, look, you've got two different types of flies that you're throwing now. You have the worm fly, which is a polola worm, but needs to be moving consistently. Or you have a feathered fly where you might be bumping it like a shrimp fly or whatever. So you have to know what your fly is doing in order to make it work properly. And you also have to know what the fish wants. Like the fish does not want to chase a fly. It doesn't want to change its track. Like if you not accurate with your fly. You have to allow that fish to close the gap to your fly without stopping your fly. So the fish is moving, your fly is moving, you let them close the gap. And that's what you do with the fly that might trigger that bite. So sometimes it might be just a bump. You might just slide it to get the attention of the fish and just kind of slow it down, let the tarpon come up on it. And then you might just keep sliding it if he likes it. He comes over and grabs it. Or if he kind of pauses, you might start bumping, just tap it. I'm talking moving the fly maybe an inch, bump, 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 slide it, boom, slide, bump up, bring it, bump up, boom, he's got it. It's the cat and mouse thing. We've all talked about the cat and mouse, but it's also being able to read the fish too. Sometimes you'll have that fly and you'll see that fly on the nose of the tarpon sitting right on his face almost. And you bump, 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 bump. Sometimes you got to take it away from him. Like the fly's trying to go, just make a big fast strip, take it away. Then it'll race up and crash on it. So feeding the animal, look, there's 5 elements in being a really good tarpon fisherman. Actually, any fisherman, when you're hunting, you have to be able to read the fish. Reading the fish is about where in the water column is that fish? Is he high and slow, low and fast? That determines where you're going to put the fly, presenting the fly, and then feeding the animal. In the book I wrote, A Passion for Tarpon, we talked about how do you feed that animal? And then how do you set the hook? These are all precise things in what you have to do. There's a little bit of gray, but in setting the hook, there's no gray. You have to know how to set the hook. You can't set with a rod tip. You've got to get tight with the stripping hand and then hold that fish, set the hook, and then you got to fight the fish. So those 5 different elements. And then the casting, your dexterity. There's so much to this game. There's so many facets to it. It's a giant puzzle, and each piece has to be polished. And you can only do that when you have fish in front of you. So to be really good in this day and age, at the expense it is to hire a great guide at $1,000 a day, it's hard to get really good. It's not hard to catch a fish. It's not. You can go catch a tarpon. But to get really good at, it's hard. It takes a long time.
When you first met Lefty, when Lefty made a joke with you and said, "I like your show, but I'm not sure about your casting," do you recall when you guys went outside what you talked about at all?
Look, let's get the facts right. Lefty is one of the great casters. He and the brains behind Lefty, Ed Jarowski, giants in the world of casting. But what I do on the ocean catching a tarpon is not what they do on a casting pond. With all due respect to Lefty, if you can get the fly where you want to get it on both sides of your body right now, up to 80, 90 feet, that's all I need to do. I can make a tight loop. I can make an open loop. I'm a much better caster now than I was back then. He may have seen me break my wrist a little bit too early. I'm a much different caster now than I was back then. So I'm sure I had some flaws. And one of the great relationships I've had in my life is going to the trade shows the last 15 years when Lefty was still alive. We used to have lunch together every day, he and I and Ed Jarowski. And Ed would open his computer and show me the power bands of a cast. And then we'd go to the casting pond. And then Lefty would come down to South Florida and he would stay with me. And then we would do clinics together, and I would teach, the finer aspects of tarpon fishing, and Lefty would teach everything else, and we would cast and knots and all that kind of stuff. So we became very close friends. Lefty could never catch tarpon like I can, but I could never cast like Lefty. So you have to separate the two. Casting is very important to me now, because I am in trade shows. I work with Hardy rods. I want to teach people. I love to teach. I understand what these guys are teaching now because they've taught me. Back then, I really didn't care. I just loved Lefty, because he was Lefty.
It doesn't matter what wind direction, through the boat, by your head. You've mastered all that.
Lefty never taught casting between the boat, cutting the boat, and that kind of stuff, because he was always on a dry ground, casting with the forehand stroke. His backhand cast, he would take his hand across his chest. But if you're trying to throw an 80-foot, saltwater fly line to a tarpon, you've got to put your left foot back and have your arm in a different position. You can't do it like a trout backhand cast. It's got to be a saltwater backhand cast, which is much different.
After you'd mastered these skills, and we shot Chasing Silver, and it turned out to be something that people liked. I think it was, they'd never seen anything that raw, that real. When we made that series and we got people so excited about it, but, a few people pushed back against it.
Well, I think what happened is I think, really some of these guys were saying, when I came out with my book and I was telling everybody what I was doing, put more boats on the water. I can't say for myself if that's exactly true, but I think, I did hear that, people are going to go tarpon fishing regardless because it's a great fish. They see them jump out of the water. My God, everybody wants to go see a fish do that. But unfortunately, a lot of people have money now and they've gravitated to the ocean. So wherever you go in the world, somebody's going to be fly fishing. It's just inevitable. It's going to get crowded. And Rick Ruoff said it best in our podcast. I asked him, I said, he was the 19th guide in Isla Morada when there was nobody down there. And he had all of it. And in the last few years, we were doing a podcast. I said, how do you feel about you leaving the dock and wherever you look, there's a boat? And he had said, I was going to quit. I would told my guides that I had, or my anglers, that I was going to fish one more May, one more tarpon season, then I was going to go to Montana and go hide. But he got back that following year and everybody was saying, Rick, man, how are you? So great to see you, man. It's going to be so much fun, man. It's going to be good tomorrow, And he realized that was his house. That's his family. And he said, I just had to figure out that, change my perspective. It was not a them problem. It was a me problem. It was my perspective on all these people. I had to figure out that I can still catch a fish and I can still show my customers a great time. And he's still doing it. And that's how I think we all have to do that. I know that, I caught a little flock, there for a little bit complaining about the numbers game, but somebody called me out. He said, well, you're one of the guys that we followed. You said it's cool. So we went fishing and now you're mad at us. And I get that. And I just have to realize that I'm okay with it because this is the good old days for them. Everybody should try it. It's an amazing thing. Just don't fish where I fish.
It's not easy to do either. And I've always been very conscious of anything I've ever shot of giving anyone an exact playbook.
Yeah. I'm not on Instagram. I'm not on Facebook, but I'm kind of into business because of our podcast. But I feel sorry for the fish. I really do. Like when I fish in Colorado, I'll go down to the river and maybe just catch one fish. I'll wait. I'll smoke a cigar, watch the hatch, maybe watch a fish rise and go try to catch him. Spend maybe a couple hours and go home. Maybe fish the last half hour of the evening because there's so many people in the water. I feel sorry for the fish and I feel sorry for tarpon. I don't need to catch that many fish anymore. I want to catch them my way, which is hunting them, find one fish, catch one fish, go home. When I'm down tarpon fishing, for that month or 6 weeks, I don't need to fish really that hard, that long anymore. I just want to have quality stuff, And when you see guys like Bob Popovich, passing, the American Museum of Fly Fishing is honoring Bob with the Isaac Walton Award. And Bobby taught a lot of people about, the way you should fish, not about, catching all the fish you can. And when he signed the book after our podcast, he said, it's not about the fish you caught. It's about the friends and the good times. And that's about it. And you see this pulse sometimes with a younger generation, and it's natural. I had it too. I feel sorry for the fish because they get the brunt end of this aggression, this insatiable desire to catch these things. And it's just the nature of the beast.
It's understandable because where this all began was someone who loved nature, who'd get dropped off to go camping as a kid. And, you've been immersed. You were tying flies for the fly shop, I think, as a kid. I mean, this has been a day one thing for you,
Yeah, look, my fishing was just as important as my ski career was. I was tying flies when I was a young kid for my allowance, so I could go buy, some licorice and a sandwich and go to the river or do whatever I was doing because I had to work, but I was too young to really get a job per se, but I needed to do something. My parents were demanding I get out of the house and go do something other than just mess around. Plus, I liked it. I liked tying flies, and I could go to the river and catch a fish on my fly. And that was one of the most amazing things that I'd ever seen. I tied a renegade, the great Chuck Fothergill. taught a few of us how to tie flies, and I went to the river. And for the first time, I was fishing a fly that I had tied, and a fish rose up on it, ate this floating renegade. And it was like, oh my God, I did that. It's like calling in a bull elk and killing him with a bow and arrow, but in a much simpler manner, you know.
Well, I even recall you talking about wanting to hunt elk with an arrow that might just bounce off them. You even said that one time.
Well, I've done that, because I was, it's against the law to harass wildlife, but I have to admit I did that a couple times because I wanted to practice, I wanted to see and not hurt them. So I'd aim for their butt, and I had a big rubber tip on my arrow, and it would just bounce off of them. I'd call them in and bounce them off their butt. I did that a couple times, and I felt bad. I told Flip Pallet that, and he said, "No, you can't do that. Come on, stop it." So Flip put the kibosh on that.
Well, you're trying for catch and release elk, and you've been talking
Yeah.
about how to break off a hook on it, as you said, with a trout with a cut off hook. I mean, you're trying to really just be at one with nature, and I guess that's the process you've been on.
Well, it's hard to practice killing elk without killing them.
Yeah.
And I was trying to figure out how can I practice killing an elk but not hurting him.
Mm-hmm.
How to call him in, how to get him in position and bounce an arrow off his butt. But you can't do that.
Well, Flip was your inspiration, I guess, for getting into the TV business. So you probably honored his words. Yeah.
Whatever Flip says, I'm gonna abide by. I love him.
Yeah.
I was a ski racer in Aspen watching this TV show every Saturday morning, Walker's Cay Chronicles. I wanted to be in Flip's boat. I wanted to be out there doing what he was doing. I was so immersed with this saltwater stuff. It was crazy. I had to do this. And I didn't think I ever would. And then I was on the TV show Fly Fishing the World, and I saw a tarpon eat my fly for the first time. I thought, wow, this is really different. And then I got back to Florida. I don't know if Christy and we were married yet or not, but I got back to Florida, and then I started fishing with Bob Branham, and then he introduced me to Harry, and the whole thing took off. But Flip was my Pied Piper that I came following, the sound of his voice. I loved his narration, and that those movies that they created on 16 millimeter film were second to none.
Oh, what a raconteur! That voice, it got us all up on the weekend.
And the Yeti commercials, my God, how good are those Yeti commercials?
Oh, they're fantastic.
I mean, it's crazy. It's interesting here. A point, a moment out. I had never seen a saltwater fish in my life. Then you jump forward maybe these number of years, and now all of a sudden I am doing a tarpon presentation at the IGFA. It was during a BTT symposium. I'm doing a tarpon presentation, and in the audience is Stu Apt, Lefty, and Flip Pallet. And then we go next door to Bass Pro Shop, and we're all signing books that we'd all written. And I look down the line, I'm going, are you friggin' kidding me? I got Chico Fernandez, Flip on my left, and they were all there. And I was at this table, only in America.
Mount Rushmore times two. When we did our gig, your segment, we had to do in only 3 days. And day one, rain out. Oh, okay. This is going to be good.
Right.
And day two, I think we had a half day. Okay. And then yet we got everything we needed in true Andy form in the hours of day.
Well, all you need is a few fish and a little sunlight. You're gonna catch them. You're gonna catch them.
Yeah. So
just give me a shot. Well, it turned out great.
And the sequel together, once you got to the bow and had a cigar in your mouth, you were back up. It was like putting a battery in.
Well, it gave me something to do while I was waiting for a shot. I mean, I smoke cigars, but usually it's on the bow of a boat. I don't smoke many when I'm playing golf or anything else. I just really when I'm fishing, and when it's really good, Nicky and I chain smoke cigars all day long. It's crazy. We look like a teepee out there, sending smoke signals.
Well, it's the fact of the matter with you is you never know what's going to happen. And I call that the Andy Mill experience. I was talking to Nicky, and it's like when we're around you, we know something's going to happen. We don't know what it is.
Usually it's not good.
I think one time I was with you, and you were around the corner or something, and you came back out of breath. Andy, what's going on? And you said there was a guy in a canal. He'd come out of a wheelchair, and he was missing a limb, and somehow you attached yourself to him to save his life. Does any of this ring a
Oh
bell?
God, no, it was crazy. We had a house on Cudjoe on the canal, and I heard somebody. I walked outside by the boat. I heard somebody scream, and I went over to the canal and I looked down. There's this guy bobbing in the water. He had one arm and no legs, and I guess he was in a wheelchair and he fell out of his wheelchair in the canal. And so I ran down there, jumped on a boat, and leaned over off the bow and grabbed a hold of his arm. And I could hold him there. I thought I could pick him up into the boat, but there's no way. There's no way I could pick this guy up. But yeah, he didn't have any legs from the knees down, and I'm almost sure he had only that one arm, and he was just kind of like flopping. I don't know how he fell out of his wheelchair. And I started screaming and called, 911, got the fire guys over there, and we saved him. But yeah, it's crazy what happens.
Congratulations. Thank you for saving his life. I don't.
Got to do what you got to do. I mean, lucky me and lucky him that we were together at the same place at the same time.
There's another story that I wanted to run by you. How did you end up in the Black Canyon of the Gunnison? You almost put some permanent damage on yourself. Do you recall this moment?
Yeah, no, I almost died down there. I really did. I had a girlfriend after Chrissy. She was very adventurous. Matter of fact, I killed 3 elk with her. She loved to sleep in a sleeping bag and go hunting and do the fishing thing. And it's pretty far down there. It's almost like 2,000 feet down. And this trail is like a goat trail. And you got to stay on it because there's some massive cliffs that you can fall off of down there. You can definitely die down there. And we were skirting this rock wall, and she was getting tired. We were almost at the bottom. I grabbed her backpack. I had her backpack in my left hand, and I was facing, over the cliff. And it was just a big ravine. It wasn't really that far, but it was vertical. And my backpack hit the wall behind me and kicked me forward, and I just launched off this cliff head first. I just disappeared with her backpack and my shoes gone. And I did a full forward flip and landed in this rock pile. And when I landed, I thought I broke my hip, and I scraped my face, and my face was all bloody. But I could feel everything. I knew I didn't break any bones, but yeah, I had a massive hematoma on my hip, and we went down and camped for 3 days, caught a bunch of fish, and went home. But that's been kind of like what I do, man. I fall off of stuff.
Going back to that Hunter S. Thompson quote, you're just trying to live it as best you can.
Now it's good that age is slowing me down because I can't keep up, and it's okay. So like now when Nicky and I hunt, I say we know where the animals are, and I just tell him, look, I'll meet you at noon. Then he can be I can't keep up. He's short, he's fast, he's incredibly talented, and I don't want to drag him down. Yeah, we could possibly be more effective hunting together in certain situations, but I would rather let him be free than to hold him back. And I don't care about killing another elk. I've killed enough. So if I kill one, good, but I'd rather have him go hard and be able to hunt fully the way he wants to hunt. That's the only sad part about when you get a little bit older. It's holding others back.
Mm-hmm. Again, all or nothing. You guys
Yeah.
have other hunts, I guess you can do.
Yeah. We can tarpon fish, hang out on a boat together.
You've had great wins. You guys having your ridiculous celebrations with spooge and crap all over you. I think that was a big tourney win. Flies all over you, skin burning.
Oh no, it was crazy. It was Doug Kilpatrick. What happened was I was fishing the Holly with Doug, but we were fishing for a really big fish down near Key West. And I said, look, I'd already won the golden fly. I said, let me trade tournaments. I'll fish the golden fly with you, Doug, for big fish down here, so weight fish tournament, and I'll fish the Holly with Paul Tejera. And so we were fishing, and we were fishing well. We went into the last day with like a 2,000 point lead, which is 200-pound fish. And I told him, I said, we catch 100-pound fish, it's all but over. And our first fish was like 115. We measured it, took photographs of it, felt bad for this fish. And it went to the bathroom all over the boat and spooged all over the place. And Doug dove in there and took that white semen and put it in his hair and started spiking his hair with his white semen. of this fish, and I put all this brown poop in my face for camouflage, and the toxicity I thought was going to curl my face off. I couldn't get that stuff off fast enough. But by the time we got back to the weighmaster, we had our hair spiked up with this white spooge from this tarpon. You know how long it took to get that stuff out of our hair? It took like a month to get it out. And we had a herd of flies that followed us from about a block away. We smelled just awful. And we walked into the weigh station to give them our straps from all the fish we caught that day. And it was just one of the funniest things I'd ever seen. Doug Kilpatrick, and his laugh is just magic. He's crazy happy.
It's like I could feel it
Yeah.
in you when we were filming. I could sense it in you, and it meant so much to you. It just there was nothing at that moment that was higher, that adrenaline.
No, no, it was like standing in the starting gate of the Olympics every day, tarpon fishing. That's how exciting it is. Every day. It's like you're ready to jump off the cliff and fly with the birds. It was that high of a rush because they were swimming. There was a lot of fish. We were catching a lot of fish, and we were cutting edge. I felt seriously we were doing some pretty cool things.
And the highs were highs, and the lows, I guess, before you started winning were very low. But you and Tim, you got past that.
Yeah. Well, we lost our very first tournament. Harry retired, and I fished with Timmy, and we had a big 120 some pound fish on the gaff, and the fly fell out of the fish's face, and Timmy dropped the fish, and he swam off with the gaff stuck in his face. So instead of getting 10 points per pound, which would have been 1,200 points, we only got 200 points for the release, and we lost by 5 ounces. And that was before we'd won a gold cup. So that was really frustrating. But we got even. When it's all said and done, everything weighs out. If you're good, you'll win a bunch, and you're going to lose a bunch too.
And that was it. You guys learned how to win, and then you got 5 of them. And
5 gold cups, 6 golden flies,
1 holly, 1 spring fly,
Del Brown, 1 spring fly, and a Del Brown. Yeah.
And that was kind of special for you as well. Had you intended to be an angler who had checked off all species and created that area for yourself?
Well, I wanted to win all 3,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't want to fish a permit tournament without Dustin Huff.
Mm-hmm.
There was 2 reasons. He was the best fisherman, and he and his dad had caught more permit for Del Brown than anybody, and the tournament was named after Del. I had this goal of winning a permit tournament, but I really wanted to win the Del Brown because it was Del, and I wanted to win it with Dustin Huff. But Dustin didn't have the confidence, he says, although I know he was the best. And I begged him for like 3 years, and we probably played 20 rounds of golf in that period of time, begging, come on, let's just fish this once. And we ended up winning it, which was really, really great. But I wanted to win all 3, and it turned out that there's only been 3 of us to win all 3 species tournaments, bonefish, permit, and tarpon. And I was the first to win all those 3. So that's a nice thing to think about.
Inspiring, really is. This brings us to 2006. You stopped tournaments altogether, and you started a new life, of which you became an author and a variety of other things.
I'd won a bunch. I'd really matched all my goals and so much more. You don't set out to win 5 gold cups. You hope to win 1 in a lifetime of fishing. If you can get 1, you're lucky.
You came back one more time, and I don't think your skills have ever diminished.
It was Rob Fordyce. His angler couldn't fish because his daughter was graduating from college or something. So Rob asked me to fish with him instead of Carlos Duncan. I said, yeah, let's do this, because we always wanted to fish with each other, because we always fished against each other. And we knew that we would be really a solid team, and we ended up winning. So that was really cool. And he said, now we have to defend. I said, no, I'm out. I wanted to go out on top. So I had been out of the game for about 4 years, and I came back for one last hurrah, and luckily we pulled that off.
You kind of knew more than anybody else that was it. What did it mean to you?
Well, it was sad, it's a relief too, because the pressure's off, the grind is off. You don't have to fish 70, 80 days a year to maintain and push, the boundaries and spend all that money. The money was secondary. But it's a big effort to win at a high level. It's a life commitment. And I was kind of over that, it wasn't important to me anymore to win tournaments. And that was just like a fluke. Let's go try to win one more. And we won. And then it was a good relief. But I didn't know how to express, the goodbye, if you will, like, I'll see you guys, nice knowing you. Not that you're ever going to leave them, because they're always going to be in your life. And now I see him because I'm still down there. We're doing podcast work. I see him all the time, but leaving the tournament scene, that arena, where all of a sudden you're no longer in there, grinding it out year in and year out. I mean, my God, I'm making it sound like I was Tom Brady in the Super Bowl winning all these and it's not that, of course, but for me, it was, because I was committed for a long time.
There was some tears shed, and some part of you knew that you weren't going back, and that part of your life was behind you, and that was an okay thing, and that you were kind of ready.
Yeah, I was ready before I even started the tournament, but after actually having been able to win that for one more time, it was really exciting. It was almost like you knew you could do it, but to be able to pull something off when you're supposed to win, that's another animal. Like, and when you go in and they go, well, he hasn't been around in 4 years, he doesn't have it, but he probably should win because he's won more than anybody. And then, to fish with that kind of pressure and then to actually make it work was really, really a lot of fun. I love Rob. Rob Fordyce is an amazing guide, and he did his job and I did mine, and we knew we could do it if we did our jobs, and we pulled it off.
It was amazing comeback. It was an amazing story. And Mark Croker said when he used to compete with you, they would always go back to the dock, and nothing mattered until they saw what your score
What we did. Good. I'm glad I had them stressed out. They deserve it. Those guys won everything.
Oh man. Well, this has been fun, and I appreciate you sitting down and going down memory lane.
No worries, man. We've seen a lot of good stuff, man. And what you did with the production of Chasing Silver and the other shows that we did together, it was fun hanging with you, man. I mean, you're a cool dude to hang with. We had a lot of laughs down the road, going down that road.
I appreciate you for stepping up, because when I walk into Almirada, I always say it's like the Wild West. And it was good to be with someone who said, F it, let's do this.
Yeah, sometimes the people take themselves a little too seriously,
I'm glad we could finally do this.
Appreciate you. Dude, let me tell you, you've seen the good, the bad, the ugly, like no one else. You've seen the real deal, man. And I appreciate you being there as a friend all those years too. You can't get through those times without people who really understand and care for you. We did some good stuff together.
Love you, man. Thank you.
Special thanks to our friends at Madison River Fishing Company for being part of this journey. They've been providing quality fishing products worldwide for 40 years and are indispensable to fly fishermen in the know. Find them at mrfc.com.